2024 was the year of Billy Carson's downfall. 2025 will be the rise of Wes Huff. Now, I understand that Wes Huff got a meteoric jumpstart to the end of 2024, which is carried on into 2025, but there's been a couple of big podcasters, Joe Rogan, and now Patrick Bet-David, that have had Billy Carson on their platforms before, that have now had Wes Huff on afterwards in the aftermath of this whole Wes Huff and Billy Carson podcast. This podcast right here was a banger. It went into a little bit more detail that a lot of us probably would have expected to come on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I wanted to share this with you guys.
People like Billy are very confident in the way that they say things, but that confidence isn't always backed up with the reality of the evidence. The sources you use were not primary.
We're still talking
and they
over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting a lot of time.
Confidence and competence are not the same thing. And I thought what was surprising to me about my interaction with Billy was that I was expecting some sort of rebuttal. Billy went to Mark's house with a handwritten cease and desist letter.
People would never expect to go there. What happened after you guys were done with the podcast?
Well, we did the podcast, and then it was very clear that Billy did not want the podcast to air.
Why? Because a genius solves problems before they happen. And I'm going to drop the mic on that.
Some weird people are going to become Christians next 2 years.
And if you watch the interaction I had with them, it's on my YouTube channel. There was no rebuttal.
So yeah, go on.
All right,
we can do a follow-up.
I really appreciate it, Billy. Thanks so much for interacting.
What a crazy intro to this video, guys. Sit back with me while we unpack this video. I want to go over a couple of talking points. We're not going to go through the whole video because it's 2.5 hours. It will be linked down below so you guys can go check it out if you have not done so already. But let's get into the meat of this.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the interview with you and the podcast that the fellow who was on there, his name is Mark, I want to say his last name correctly, Minard, right?
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. And his podcast is called Elevation Beyond. I think it's called
Elevating Beyond.
Elevating Beyond,
Yeah.
right? With Mark Minard. And so walk me through how this whole thing happened with you and Billy Carson. Because
Right.
when you watch Billy's been at it for 14, 15 years. I think the first time, if you search up his material, you will hear he started in 2010. And he's gotten tens, if not hundreds of millions of views on many different interviews. I think even if you include TikTok, Instagram and everything combined, it's probably in the billions of views that he's gotten.
Yeah.
Until he sat down with you, but walk me through the invitation. Did Mark invite you? Did Billy invite you? How did that happen?
Yeah. So Mark invited me. He sent me a DM on Instagram the day before. So as far as I understand it, the plan was actually for Mark and Billy to interact. Mark's a Christian. So he has Christian faith and conviction, and had talked to Billy because they had been friends, talked a lot about business together and different things like that. And so they were setting up, which had sort of been in the ether for a while, to have a conversation about some of the disagreements that they had about what Billy said about Christianity, how Mark feels about Christianity. And Anton, who is Mark's media manager, had compiled a bunch of different sources that Mark could look at and kind of review in plan for this. And I'd done in some of my social media videos, just some short response videos to some things that Billy had said on your podcast when you had him in, when Andrew Schultz had him on, when Joe Rogan had him on, just quick, 2-minute things, just kind of correcting some of those errors. And so Anton put together a Google Doc of some of this stuff, me, a few other people. And how I understand it is that Mark just kind of said to Anton right before, what happens if we just reach out to Wes? Like, what happens if we just see if he can come and interact? So he reached out to me the day before. I was out at a lunch meeting with a friend and saw the message and, couldn't get down to Florida to actually do it in person, but said, I'll jump on a call, and I'm more than willing to do that and interact with Billy and kind of go back and forth with some of the claims that he's made about Christianity.
And what was your biggest takeaway when you sat down with him? What did you see that was maybe different than you had seen him on different podcasts when he's speaking? What did you sense?
I think people like Billy are very confident in the way that they say things, but that confidence isn't always backed up with the reality of the evidence. And so confidence and competence are not the same thing. And I thought what was surprising to me about my interaction with Billy was that I was expecting some sort of rebuttal. And if you watch the interaction I had with him, it's on my YouTube channel, there was no rebuttal. So we get into the topics. He claims that Jesus wasn't crucified. He kind of has these sources that he uses. He brought those up, predictably, as I thought he might. And I addressed why those sources don't work for his claim. And then he collapsed. He just...
It's crazy because, as Patrick Bet-David said, this guy's been doing this stuff since 2010. So the knowledge is there, right? The confidence in your knowledge should be on level 1000. There's no way that you should have been having these arguments your entire career. And then when someone just gives you a little bit of pushback on it, you completely fold. And then you blame it on sickness. I get that Billy may have been believing in these documents as actual literal truth without doing much research into where these documents even came from in the beginning. Anybody can go online and Google something real quick nowadays and sound like an expert without no true roots. And I really, truly feel like that's exactly what happened with Billy in all of this to begin with.
Said, well, the first claim was that it was from the Sinai Bible, which is Codex Sinaiticus. And I happened to have a facsimile, a photocopy of Codex Sinaiticus on my shelf. And so I simply pulled it off my shelf and said, well, do you mind telling me where you think it denies the crucifixion, or that the crucifixion isn't there? Because this is a 4th century Greek Bible. It has the crucifixion. And so he kind of pivoted to saying, well, no, I misspoke. I actually meant the Gospel of Barnabas, which is a known forgery. And so I think my surprise was that he didn't try to double down. He just completely capitulated and then tried to move the topics onward.
Now, I've been seeing quite a bit of criticism against Wes, where a lot of people are trying to say that he doesn't know what he's talking about. A lot of his information's false. Scholars don't agree with his claims. No one believes the things that he's saying when it comes down to the scholarly world about biblical ancient text and things like that. I think that that's a cop-out. I think it's a coping mechanism for people that are getting their belief system shattered by just real evidence. Unfortunately, this will always be. It doesn't matter if it's Wes or if some other person rises up in the ranks. There's always going to be this opposition to him because there's always a spiritual battle going on. And I know you're probably like, oh, this isn't a spiritual thing. But it definitely is. You see, Billy is on one side of things. He's the enemy of Christ. He's talking about demonic stuff and saying it's aliens and saying it's Egyptian gods or Greek gods or whatever the case is this is still demonology masked as light, masked as enlightenment, masked as forbidden knowledge. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have the Christians which seek actual truth, not the seeker community, which are seeking truth. We tell the truth. And there's always going to be people at odds because of that. The Christian aim should always be to offer information with grace, even offer criticism with grace, because we got to put ourselves in that situation. What if I was Billy? How would I want Christians to handle me? How would I want this whole situation to be dealt with? I would want it to be dealt with as much grace as possible. And I do know that we have to do that with Billy. But we also have to do that with Billy's followers as well. Because I don't know about you guys, but I see a lot of Billy fanboys and just atheists or, seeker community people being pretty harsh about all of this, saying that we're haters or saying these other things. And really, that just goes to show the true nature behind those people and what their intent is when they're trying to project that on Christianity.
So you're asking him questions because I'm watching the back and forth. You're not being aggressive and disrespectful. You kept posing questions. So may I ask where you got this source from? If you don't mind me asking, can you break this thing down for me? And he's giving his rebuttal. And what do you know about this, and that? And he would pause. And then you would go and say, well, actually, I wrote a thesis on this. And the approach that you're going back and forth with him. What happened after you guys were done with the podcast?
And that's just the perfect example of what I was just saying. The way to handle things is with grace, respect. We're not supposed to just slander and kick a person when they're down.
Well, we did the podcast, and then it was very clear that Billy did not want the podcast to air. So he got in contact with Mark and he said, this thing can't go out. And he had a couple of different reasons, which he verbalized, but the reasons did kind of shift. There was some talk of a debate. Well, at first he said, I didn't really understand that this was going to be as of a debate as it turned out to be. And I typically ask a fee. So he says he, asked 50 grand for a debate. That was never put forth, and so it was unfair because this is his kind of standard practice. Now,
this is the first time hearing of him saying that he wanted a fee, which I could see him doing something like that. If he's going to get embarrassed, he's going to get monetized out of it. But nonetheless, I think that these are all just tactics. Because as we see, he did go on that rant for 3 hours the next day on his podcast where he took the video down. I think that this is all just a mad scramble, a mad dash to try and save face, prevent the document from or to prevent the podcast from going out. And then when that failed, he issued the cease and desist letters.
It cost $50,000 to debate Billy Carson. And then he brought forward that there was some sort of interaction, formal debate that was being set up with another Christian that this was interfering with. Now, I doubt that that was the case. I've been part of events where debates have taken place, and why this conversation would have truly impinged on a later debate is unclear to me.
That doesn't make sense.
That was what he said, and so
go ahead. You're saying, here's what happened. Some people are saying, I don't know, you're just making things up. That would have never happened. Billy's strong. He would never be able to, you would never be able to hang with somebody like Billy. And
right. Yeah, and then I just kind of say to Mark as we're talking back and forth, because we're communicating throughout, the course of the aftermath of this. And I said, hey, people are accusing me of lying, of making this up. And Mark was quite uncomfortable with that. Mark was quite uncomfortable with the fact that people are accusing me of dishonesty. And so then he made a video where he said that it did happen. And in that video, he included a number of clips of the actual interaction.
But not the whole podcast.
No, he held on to the podcast for over a month.
Oh, so let me get this straight. So when was the actual interview?
October 18th.
On my birthday, October 18th. And he released it when?
That just goes to show you the intent behind all of this. A lot of people are saying that this was some conspiracy, some mad dash attack by the Christians to come in and ruin Billy's credibility. But if that was the case, there wouldn't have been Mark hanging on to it for a month. There wouldn't have been Wes staying silent about it for a couple of months. And then not only that, but when it did come out, they were respectful to Billy at first, right? And not that they got disrespectful, but they respected Billy's wishes to not air this, right? But they did tell him, like, look, this is going to have to come out. And you trying to hide it is the Barbra Streisand effect. It's going to make this worse than ever, because when you tell someone not to do something, what's the first thing they want to do? They want to do it. So when you try to hide this, you're going to be like, what's in there that he's trying to hide? That what's so bad about this that he doesn't want us to know? And it's because he got his points, his talking points that he's been making money off of for the past few decades now obliterated. Now, a lot of people say that Wes is a grifter. I have yet to see where Wes is a grifter beyond any of this. Wes isn't selling a product. Wes isn't pushing a course. He isn't teaching some school, like, come sign up for my online class. He's not doing any of that. Now, Billy, on the other hand, has been making books, and, he's got products, and his whole business is formulated around this secret community forbidden knowledge belief. And this right here can obliterate that, not to the point to where he won't be able to make any money, because there's still a lot of people out there that believe this stuff, but to the point to where it does affect it. It puts him in the focus in a negative light instead of the expert and the man that he portrayed himself to be as this guy with all this deep knowledge that just got debunked with a couple of not even deep rebuttals. Just, hey, this is a forgery, and this is how we know. Oh, the Codex Sinaiticus doesn't say that. This is what it says. And then he just completely folded on his points.
Because on your channel it says December 9th.
Yes.
And I don't see it on his channel anymore.
No. So what transpired was that Mark released it in November, and he released it, and it was up for less than 24 hours. In fact, I don't even think it was up for more than 6 hours.
Okay.
Because Billy showed up to Mark's house with a cease and desist letter at 2:30 in the morning.
Okay, so is this the part where there's a video of it with a Ring camera?
Yeah. So if people are interested in this, I would recommend two sources. Anton put out a video where he kind of he chronologically lays out some of the things that led up to it, and then Mark himself, just a couple of weeks ago, put out a video. Now,
the guy Mark Minard, he's actually here on this podcast towards the end, and he has some stuff to say about all of this as well. But I think that Mark, being Billy's friend, did the right thing by trying to help him, which you'll see here in a moment. But at the end of the day, the claims have always been so weird and wonky that none of this has any ground to stand on anyway. So at the end of the day, there's nothing Mark could have done to help Billy save face, because you're going against the truth, which is the Bible. So literally, there's no way you can win. You can't make up another truth. There is only one truth. But listen to this.
The complexities of his situation. Wasn't going to repost the video, but I decided to repost the video on my end on early December.
And you guys spoke, and he said, "I'm going to go live with it."
I said I'm going to go live with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was his reaction when you said that?
He was fine with it. Mark has been pretty behind the scenes.
Okay.
I think on purpose and for good reasons. He's gotten a lot of flack because of some of the way that the conversation transpired with Billy. But if you ask Mark, he will say, and I think he says in his video, he was so surprised during the interaction. He's in the room with Billy, and he's very surprised that Billy, who is Mr. Confidence, Mr. Ancient Evidence, is completely collapsing. So for Billy, who usually always has the monologue, to say, well, okay, well, that's fair. Let's move on to the next topic. I think Mark was, not to speak for him, but I think he was genuinely a little bit confused. And so felt like he, to a certain degree, needed to come to Billy's aid in the course of this conversation, because he just felt the kind of secondhand embarrassment that was going on in the room because Billy was really not acting in the way that Billy usually does.
Now, let me ask you,
which is strange, because anybody that knows anything about Billy Carson knows that he's real pompous, he's real arrogant, he's real like over the top, just really like domineering type of characteristics, and that's not what we see here. We see that Billy was like frail, like unsure, very uncertain of his claims, and just real quick to move on to the next topic. But then we see at the beginning of this video where he was saying, we're focusing on one thing. There's many other things in my teachings that we could be talking about, but not everything in your teachings go directly against Christianity. And that's one of the things that I think Billy's community fails to realize with us. We don't care about everything that you talk about. We care about the things that you say that are in the direct opposition to the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what we care about. We care about you leading souls to hell. And no, we're not judging. That's just simply what's happening. If you don't follow Jesus, you go to hell. And that's where Billy's leading a lot of people to, masked as true knowledge.
In 14 years since he's been creating content, or he's been out there, Billy, and he's been sharing his stories that he has. Why do you think this hasn't happened for 14 years?
I mean, I think you can strategically put yourself in positions where you're not going to be put on the defense.
Yeah, a $50,000 debate fee will prevent a lot of people from interviewing you or going to debate with you. That's one way to keep yourself in the top spot, because nobody's going to pay $50,000 to debate you.
The thing is with the internet, and I'm sure you know this as well as anybody, Patrick, that like people love sensationalism. And we live in a world where we know a little about a lot, but we don't know a lot about a little. And so we live in this Wikipedia world, right? You can just hop online. You don't really need to know information. You can kind of, you can shed that out to someone else, right? You can, and the someone else being basically the supercomputer in your pocket. And so, and people love sensationalism. People like to hear the crazy story, the conspiracy theory, for, sometimes I think genuine reasons. Some conspiracy theories are true sometimes. But I think when you have people who are saying pretty outrageous things, people like to be entertained, and people like the more sensationalistic theory.
Which is one of the reasons why Billy's channel and his information has been so successful in the past anyway, because it is outlandish, it is out there, it is conspiratorial, it is salacious. It's definitely some over-the-top stuff, and you're like, this is so crazy, it's so weird, like, if this were true, it'd be crazy, So yeah. And people like scandal, people like confrontation. That's just the type of world we live in, where the negative gets more views than the positive. I make videos about Jesus Christ and no one watches them. I make a video on Billy Carson and everybody watches it. People like the negative stuff. Now here, Patrick Bet David asked Wes if he'd be up for a second round. Would he actually want to do a legit debate? And Wes says yes. I think that would be truly amazing if Wes and Billy both sat down, had time to prepare, got both of their arguments together, and had a moderator to handle this. I think that would be astronomical for both parties involved.
Maybe he was sick that day. Maybe he had a lot on his mind. Maybe he had challenges with family, siblings, kids, other things that's going on. Sometimes people have a bad day.
Yeah.
Would you be open to the idea of another one, the two of you guys together, long form, and maybe he brings somebody with him?
Yeah, I would be open to it. I mean, that was the original plan, was that this interaction that we had online would be kind of a precursor to, ideally, an in-person thing with Billy. And I actually said, when Billy sent me the cease and desist letter, I made a video where I said, I will actually adhere to all of the terms and conditions of this letter if you decide to run it back with me and we do it in person. Because I think Billy has a lot of claims about the Bible, and I hope that our conversation kind of made him think twice about a lot of the claims he's made about the Bible, especially the ones that are patently false and can be verified even with just a quick Google search.
I don't think it did, though. Not even a little bit, honestly.
But I think there are still things that Billy has said about the history of Christianity, about biblical languages that do need to be corrected, not because I have some sort of vendetta against Billy, but because I want people to know what is true. And
I want to focus on what he said, not because I have some vendetta against Billy. That's not the true Christian nature. It's to hold grudges or to be vindictive or to get revenge or to just like attack someone out of, some selfish type of gain. I think that people need to understand that. And while, yes, there may be some Christians that don't fit that narrative, but at the end of the day, you can't lump all Christians in with a few bad seeds. Especially right nowadays, we got a lot of pastors falling from grace and a lot of Christians doing a lot of weird stuff. I'd go so far as to argue that some of those people really aren't Christians and they're just Christian in name only. But we see that Billy does have some claims out there that are truly false and they're doing people a lot of damage, masked as if it was the truth.
Someone who has studied this stuff formally and does, read Hebrew and Greek, and I want people to actually know what the reality of what these things concerning the historical reliability and the truthfulness and the verisimilitude of the Bible actually are.
Wes, let me ask you, I'm on your channel right now. I'm just kind of wondering who else you react to, right? Who else would be somebody where you would say is like a Billy Carson that, shares certain stories that, has caught some traction? Who else would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I'm actually scheduled to do an online event with a guy named Aaron Abke, who is a growing individual within. I think Aaron has more kind of, his repertoire is a little bit more than Billy's. But my friend Stephen Boyce, who has a PhD and is brilliant on church history, and I think his PhD research was actually on Gnostic Gospels. Him and I are going to do an interaction with Aaron and another individual as well. But I mean, off the top of my head, no one necessarily comes to mind, but there are. I mean, the internet is kind of a wild, wild west with this stuff and just claims that are made. I mean, I think it's emblematic in this conversation. We live in this world, but we live in a world where social media has kind of designed it where we're so used to claims being thrown out, but claims are not actual evidence. And so
that's good.
You can make a claim where you say something and, because it's, in 140 characters, and we're so used to that, we think that that's actually rationale, but that's not rationale. That's an assertion. An assertion is kind of like the roof of the building. You don't start building the building by the roof. That's the last thing to go on top. The foundation, the walls, everything internal, that's the rationale and the evidence. And then you put the assertion on top. But we live in this world where everybody's throwing out assertions and we've actually forgotten how to articulate what evidence and reasons and rationale actually are.
That's pretty good because anybody could pick up a camera now, get a few 100,000 followers and be an expert and really don't even know what they're talking about. And so we got to be careful where we get our information from. Now, I do think it's great that Wes is going to be having some more conversations with people that don't agree with him, because here's the thing. We can't live in an echo chamber. Now, just because I make videos that are Christian based, it doesn't mean that I don't understand that there are different points of views on things, because there's even different points of views inside the Christian community. Some believers believe one way, some believers believe another way. Some believers think that certain sins are not sin. Some people don't believe in the Trinity. I believe in the Trinity. I'm aware that out of the billions of people in the world, there's always going to be somebody that disagrees with me. But that still doesn't change the fact that I'm going to follow Jesus Christ 100% through and through. Now, this part of the video is where Mark Minard comes on and he discusses his side of things. We're going to watch a few moments of this real quick before we end this video.
Did you know when you set this up that it was going to turn into what it turned into?
If I knew it was going to turn into what it turned into, you should be hiring me as like the biggest marketing genius. I wish I could say I was that smart.
Would you have done it if you knew what it was going to turn into? Would you have done it now, looking back?
That's a great question.
So yes, and I'm going to tell you why. First of all, going through this whole process, Billy being a good friend of mine, this whole situation has been just insanity. But what I didn't realize, like through all the attacks and everything that was going on, now that this has gone as viral as it has, I've started to receive hundreds of messages a day from people telling me, this like chokes me, like this podcast has brought them from a dark spot back to God. And I didn't realize, I didn't have a clue how many people had been so steered away from their beliefs in God and were just fallen into darkness from the, I mean, I've had so many
If
people.
I ask you this, what
That's amazing. Hallelujah. All glory goes to God throughout all this, right? But that's so amazing because there are a lot of people out there that have no knowledge of the Bible. And so they'll believe anyone that goes against it for a lack of knowledge. For a lack of knowledge, people perish. And so when you have someone that has a large following and sounds like they know what they're talking about, it's going to be easy to not believe what the Bible says because you don't got no knowledge of the Bible either. And Billy was just leading a lot of people astray. And this has been an eye opener for a lot of people. Of course, there's always going to be the naysayers, but this is a more net positive thing than anyone that's on the opposing side is trying to make it seem like this is all negative. It's not a witch hunt. It's not a, oh, let's throw Billy under the bus. It's a people are getting saved and their eyes are being opened. And that's what this is all about, honestly, guys.
what's interesting is it looks like when you're doing it, you and Billy are friends, like I was saying earlier.
We are.
You are friends.
Well, we were.
Yeah, you were friends. Maybe give us your version. And again, I want to keep this less than 5 minutes because we got to wrap up. Maybe give us your version. While it's going on, after it's done, conversation with Billy and what happened with that. And you made a video reaction to it. And every time you said the word Billy, you bleeped yourself out. So maybe give us your perspective.
Try to keep it in 5 minutes. So I've been on Billy's show. He's been on mine. We've known each other for business. And we talked for a while about, I'm a Christian. It'd be cool to have you on and just be able to talk about your beliefs and mine and let people see we can still respect each other and that we have similar core values. And then as we got closer to it, I'm like, I don't know anything about like the Emerald tablets and all that good stuff. So that led me to Wes. 24 hours notice, got a hold of Wes to be on. Then I let Billy know, hey, I gave him his name. I said he's a historian, a linguist, gave all his credentials. I'm like, would that be cool if he joined us? Because I don't know anything about that stuff. I can talk about my faith, why I believe in God, but when it comes to that, like, I'm not shy to say I'm clueless. And he's like, oh yeah, bro, like it'll be cool. Like I'm used to doing that. So I went into this thinking we're just going to have an amazing conversation as usual. And in all honesty, you came off as very humble, and Billy, and honestly, I thought Billy did. The one that gets the most flack that looks like an idiot is me. That's overly interrupting throughout it, and people thought I was a moderator. And I got thrown off when you started having your responses. I'm used to talking to my good man Billy as a great friend, and we're sitting in my backyard by my pool, and he's talking about aliens and stuff, and it's just fascinating. And he's like, here's where we found it in the pyramids. So when you started doing the first rebuttal and you gave your response, I was sitting back and I was totally ready for Billy to be like, and have this full. And when he was just like, fair enough. I'm sitting there and it's different when you're in a room than when you're online. And I'm just like, what is happening right now? Like I was really caught off guard from that path.
You seemed very uncomfortable. You seem very uncomfortable. Now, when you made the reaction video, what happened afterwards? It ends. And I think that's the one part I want to address like in the next 2 minutes.
Sure.
What happened afterwards, when you guys ended the podcast?
So I got a message from him and his wife asking me to call him. I talked to him and they had asked me they had requested, didn't get anything in writing, anything. They're like, can you not air that right now? Because his wife said, we're planning on having another debate set up. And she's like, I didn't realize you guys were having a debate, even though we talked about this for some months. And I don't want it to interfere with that, is what I was told. And Billy chimed in, love you to death, Billy, kind of had a different version of how he felt it went. Some behind the scenes stuff. I explained, I thought Wesley was very respectful, had tons of knowledge. And I said, and I thought you came out respectful. But anyway, for now, we won't air it. Wesley did the response video. People found out the show was done, that it wasn't, they requested it to not be aired. They found out it was on my show. I continued to get attacked for like a month on every level about this. I made time to meet with Billy and try to mediate about, can we do like a follow-up show, like something, if you want to even prepare more, we could do it and have it more structured. And he's like, I don't know. I don't want to have anything to do with that West guy. The attack.
Well, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with someone that owned me either, but I would take time to get my facts straight, to get my lines together, to get whatever it was that I needed to do to try to come back and save some type of face instead of doing what he did, which is get on there and do a 3-hour rant and then delete the video. So either way it goes, like, this whole situation is just playing out badly for Billy. After everything's all said and done, I do believe that Wes and even Mark tried to handle this the best way that they could for it to blow up and be what it turned out to be. Now, after the fact, I think is when Billy took things way too far, went all off in the left field, cease and desist letters getting written, just behaving very immaturely. But I don't expect, and I don't mean this as a jab, I don't expect anything less from someone that's not a Christian. There's just a certain measure of things, a certain amount of grace that gets extended when you have Jesus Christ in your life that Billy just doesn't have. He's got a lot of work to do. I do think that this is going to be a great year for Wes. I do know that he is very busy doing his dissertation for his PhD or whatever he's in school for right now. He's doing some type of dissertation for it. So I do know that school is a big priority. He's doing a lot of work with Apologetics Canada right now. So I don't know how many more debates like this or I don't know how many more interviews rather are coming up like this. But I think, hey, let's get Wes on every single platform that Billy Carson has ever went on, and let's get his side of things and really just give Wes a chance to shine for a moment. I don't think there's anything wrong with someone that's focused on God and spreading the truth in an accurate way. I don't think there's nothing wrong with platforming that guy. Now, of course, there's going to be the naysayers that are always going to come and say, hey, Wes got this wrong, Wes got that wrong. And sure, there might be some things Wes is off about, but at the end of the day, the things that he's off about are small. He does own up to it, and they don't distort the truth of the gospel being spread. So I don't know what you guys' opinions are on this. I think Wes is doing great. Keep up the good work, Wes. We're all here to support you. We got your back. I'm going to support anything he does. I hope you will too. That's going to do it for this one. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, God bless.